Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the legal/government/political correspondent. And today our guest is Jim Thomas, who's from the Lake Mallalieu Association. Jim, before we get into our subject matter, we're here basically talking about Lake Mallalieu and the effects of the Willow River Dam projects. Is that fair to characterize it as that?
I would say that would be more than fair, Jamie.
And it's a subject that goes back quite a few years. And you, before we did this interview or set this up, you had pointed me to a website, so I want to mention it right off the bat, well, sure, a couple more times. But there is a lakemallalieu.com, and for our viewers, I'll spell Mallalieu as Mallalieu. And on that website, there's all kinds of links, news, scenic pictures, history, boating laws, and all the issues that surround Lake Mallalieu. So how long have you been a member of the Lake Mallalieu Association?
Well, I moved onto the lake basically about 20 years ago in 1996. I think I got talked into being a board member probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm currently the vice president of the Lake Mallalieu Association.
All right, and prior to that, or thereabouts, you actually have some record of public service.
Sure, yeah.
Tell our viewers about that.
I appreciate it. I had the opportunity to serve on the North Hudson Village Board for 6 years. I, for a period, chaired public welfare, public safety, and was advantageous in getting single stream recycling into the North Hudson Village. Ultimately, back when Dean Knutson was mayor of Hudson, he tagged along on our contract, and we together with some great people on the board got a lot of positive things done. I had a little bit of a business background which helped me out, and I enjoy doing things that I believe the community, if they had the time I do have, would be doing themselves.
And why is it that you have this time? Is it that you don't have a regular 40-hour day job? Or
I don't. I paid my dues at a young age. I started working when I was 15. I owned an automotive service for 36 years in downtown St. Paul, and very fortunately, I'm happy to say the legacy is continuing. I sold the last remaining stock of that company to my son, Carl Thomas, back in 2012. So now I continue to fix problems, but not automotive problems.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Lake Mallalieu Association. How can you be eligible to be a member?
I think by devoting your time and your passion to what we believe is right and good for all that use that body of water, all that live on it, the community, the municipalities, and just having an understanding of a bit of the history about it and the concerns that we face going forward.
You mentioned a little bit about the history, and I don't want to spend too much of our 25 minutes on that because want to stay in the present, because I know that it's a very hot issue right now. We want to get to that, but it does have a rich heritage, and you know, this is an area of the state we're most proud of. I think our scenic beauty, and that's where this certainly fits in. In fact, I was skimming your history on the Lake Mallalieu, and you know, it goes back 10,000 years to the glaciers, but we won't
go back quite 10,000 years.
How about just when the dams that were put on Willow River to form some of these lakes?
I think to try to keep this very condensed, the history of Lake Mallalieu, Little Falls Lake, the Willow River State Park, it all goes back to the early 1800s. And a lot of people may or may not be aware of this. You touched on it earlier. People that are viewing this, please take a moment to view the Lake Mallalieu website, read the history, but just a couple of key notes. As we sit here in this interview, without having had the Lake Mallalieu Dam and the Little Falls Dam and the other dams upstream, it's possible that Hudson as we know it would not exist. I know it's a bold statement, but just to break it down ever so briefly, In 1834, a series of dams was created. At that point, the logging industry was floating over 5 million board feet of lumber down these waterways annually. It created an industry that brought people into this area. It went on to create hydroelectric plants in the later 1800s that lasted 15 years that supplied power to Hudson. It also created over 4,000 tons of ice annually, pre-refrigerators to keep everybody's food cool. Okay. And all of this came from Lake Mallalieu, and then subsequently our railroad industry and so many other things. I could go on forever.
So a huge economic impact over the years.
Huge, absolutely.
And one of our big economic drivers in the state is tourism. Mm-hmm. And people come for our state parks, and so the Willow River State Park enters into this. Tell the folks a little bit. I know that you've got a map here, and maybe we'll be able to get that on the screen by use of technology and whatnot, but just kind of explain how the waterway works in relation to the St. Croix River, where the river empties into the national river.
Yeah, the Willow River State Park is a incredibly well-utilized park. It is the fourth highest revenue generating park in the state of Wisconsin. Just a couple of quick numbers, but annually over 800,000 guests utilize the park. It generates over $30 million in community expenditures in the surrounding communities, from people buying groceries, firewood, gasoline, minnows, ice, every such thing, going out to dinner, doing whatever they do. But more importantly, the focal point of the Willow River State Park was Little Falls Lake. It created what was known as one of the best bass producing lakes in our area. And it is just simply a gorgeous park. And we strongly want to see Little Falls Lake come back, and that will happen when the dam is
And that state park was created about 50 years ago with the dams, when the dams were purchased from NSP, because they had been power producing prior to that.
Correct.
And the state purchased those, and that's what created the state park. Is that right?
That was 1967, if I'm correct, and local people, iconic people, Fred Kramer, who was the owner of Dick's Bar, Willis, a lot of iconic... Willis Miller, yes. All of these people were instrumental. That would not be a park had they not seen the need for it. And it's just wonderful to have something like this in our backyard that is used by so many people. And
so obviously you had started off talking about the history, how these dams are created in early 19th century, mid 19th century, that they were installed, and age has a way of wrecking things. It started putting stress on it. So then somebody made the decision to remove two of the dams upstream, and those were the ones that formed like Little Falls Lake. Is that right?
Yeah, actually in 1934 there was a monumental flood, and that pretty much wiped out the dams. At that point, they replaced all of the dams. They
had been replaced.
They had been replaced. So they created a new dam at the St. Croix River, which dammed up Lake Mallalieu. Then they created the Little Falls Lake, and I believe this to be correct. And then upstream of that was the Burkhart Dam, which originally was a flour mill, subsequently a hydroelectric plant, and then upstream from that was another impoundment that was created. So there were actually at one point 4 dams in this area, and then that would bring us up to the 5th dam, which is still in place at New Richmond.
Which 2 dams were removed to form the current trout stream then?
The trout stream that was created was north of Willow River State Park. The 2 dams were both north of Willow River State Park.
And all right, so that would be getting into the Burkhart area, thereabouts. All right,
yes.
All right. So now getting into that critical time period, 2014, when there's a study done, and someone says that the Little Falls Dam is not complying with the 1,000-year flood guidelines. Can you explain that a little bit? What does that mean?
Yeah, there had been two engineering reports done over the last decade, or slightly over the last decade, evaluating the condition of the dam. And then there was a change in the laws, and a study created that made all of the dams in Wisconsin, there was a requirement made to have them pass a 100 and a 1,000 year flood. And this dam did not, was not capable of passing those guidelines.
So is that a good thing for homeowners and users of the state park, or is that a bad thing that it couldn't comply with that 1,000-year guideline?
Well, I would have to say it was a bad thing.
Okay, and why do you say that?
Well, because the dam creates such an economy, and it's used by so many. It has so many purposes. When they took out the two dams upstream, there were hundreds of thousands of tons of silt that had been contained by those, which eventually worked its way into Little Falls Lake and was held back by the Little Falls Dam. That was the last sediment trap between the Willow River and Lake Mallalieu. So when that was breached in the fall of 2015, there was a large influx of silt and sediment that came into Lake Mallalieu.
And by breached, we mean like literally knocked over. The dam was knocked over.
Yeah, how they did it, it was rather controlled, Jamie, but the summer of 2015, they opened up gates and tried to carve a little channel through some of the sediment, and then they opened it in conjunction with rain events so that they could lower the level and try to retain the silt. But it could only get down to a predetermined point. At that point, they had to come in with heavy equipment and literally break the concrete away until it breached and opened up.
All right, and the result of that was no more Little Falls Lake.
Exactly.
And I remember that because I remember we were out canoeing in the summer of 2014 and just commenting how beautiful it was and scenic to be able to canoe that, and then the next summer, no more.
Yes, yes.
So now, and by the way, for our viewers who join us in the middle, I'd like to remind them we have our guest is Jim Thomas, who's Vice President of the Lake Mallalieu Association, a bit of a historian of Willow River State Park and all things associated with Willow River. So we've covered some of the history and that critical time period, 2015, where decisions are made to breach the dam. Then it becomes a political issue at that point, because are we going to replace the dam, or are we going to just move on to keep it just a stream and no more lake in the Willow River State Park?
Right, right. And backing up, yeah, you're right. It's a political and a financial issue. Obviously, back when all of these dams were created, there was ample money in the budgets. You could create a dam virtually anywhere for any purpose, agriculture, for for crops, for recreation. It's not that way anymore. And a lot of these dams around the state are aging. And one thing that does surface is, why should this dam be replaced when there are so many other dams that are aging, and it's easier, it's much less liability for everybody to just knock them down and turn them into the riverway that they once were. But we have to keep a little bit of a focal point on the fact that a community was created 150 years ago around this dam that possibly wouldn't exist today. And I know we've covered that a little bit earlier.
Right.
But it gets down to be a financial issue. Obviously, it would be much cheaper to just eliminate the dam and let the water flow. But I think the thing that needs to be kept in the forefront is, when you have a state park that is generating $30 million annually in expenditures to the municipalities and communities directly around it, not to mention the profits that the park is generating for the state, and the thousands of people that use this for recreation, for fishing, that are teaching children, I bet there's been thousands of children that have caught their first fish on that lake.
Right. Well, since the breach of the dam, which was just shy of 2 years ago, then have we been able to see some of that economic impact of the lack of it and the number of visitors to the state park? Have they gone down and so forth?
We've got numbers. They're not conclusive, but what I have been
We
hearing...
really only have one full year, so that's...
Right. I believe the answer to that, in my heart and in all honesty, would be yes. From what I've heard from retail businesses, restaurants, bars, they are feeling an impact of that. And talking to Aaron, the park supervisor, it's been off. I don't have numbers to substantiate it. They have not been made available to us.
Okay, but it's not all just dollars and cents here. What are some of the environmental impacts that have already been witnessed? Are there some?
Oh my God, the impacts they're just broad-reaching. I think the biggest impact that we're going to be facing is, well, you said you've been up there prior to the breach. We used to go up there and get groups of people, hang around the park, put our kayaks in, kayak down the Willow River, come out to Lake Mallalieu, have a picnic, and I would watch on any given weekend, dozens, if not 30, 40, 50 kayaks, canoes doing similar things. That waterway is no longer navigable, and so that has completely stopped. So the impacts, other than the economic direct impacts that we're feeling, are the impacts with the ability to use the waterways downstream. Obviously, with Little Falls Lake not being there, we've lost that fishing hole for...
Well, how about sediment?
Well, sediment is a key issue. There's no doubt about it that sediment right now has dramatically impacted the Willow River and Lake Mallalieu. There are currently 2 residents that can no longer utilize the lake. Their boats they can no longer navigate through the Willow River to get out to Lake Mallalieu, where they once were able to do that. A case in point, having been on the lake for so long, in addition to every other hat that I wear, I'm activities director for Lake Mallalieu. And for the last decade, I've been putting together the 4th of July pontoon parade, and subsequently we anchor our boats in what used to be a beautiful sandbar at the mouth of the Willow River, set up 2 volleyball courts, cook, have barbecues, and spend the day playing water volleyball. At that point, the water was calf deep, and it was nice. It was beautiful. You could fall and laugh about it. You can't walk in there anymore. It's knee-deep muck, and it is something that would turn your stomach to even try to walk through. So those days are gone, and with that come a tear and a slightly broken heart.
This is where the advocacy comes in, because they held public hearings about whether to bring back the Little Falls Dam, correct?
Correct.
And what was the response?
At this point, we're very honored that the DNR has got a good plan together. It would be nice to see the timeline be tightened up a little bit, because it seems like it's taking more time than it should. But Governor Walker, Senator Harsdorf, all of our politicians have been involved in this. What started out a couple of years ago with a $3.2 million budget was raised to $8 million, and subsequently Governor Walker budgeted an additional $11 million to get this total budget up to $19 million.
Just to replace it. But you're jumping right to, I know where you want to get, because you want the folks to understand what they can do to help. But when they had the public hearings and the input of all the stakeholders and anyone who has an interest in it, it was pretty overwhelmingly to replace.
Yes, that is correct.
And that's what I mean, is that you wouldn't have these politicians, the governor and the state representatives, getting behind this if it wasn't a very popular and something that was considered big benefit to Wisconsin, this part of Wisconsin, correct?
I would believe so, yes. You know, I think it stands to reason when you've got a park that's you know, hosting 800,000 people annually and generating $30 million in spending to budget $19 million to rebuild a dam that could be the pivotal point of that. It seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, even a 20% reduction of the use of the park or the spending that reverberates, and it adds up very fast. It would pay for itself. Mm-hmm. But not always where there's a will, there's a way, and that's when the pocketbook comes into play. So something that would start out 3.2 million is now sixfold. It's now 19 million. So what's the plan and what's the timeline?
Well, the timeline it was our hopes from the original reports from the DNR that the dam would be built, completed, and refilled in 2020. There's been a couple of things, I guess, that have come up that are possibly moving that to 2021.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's the hope. Now, what needs to be done in the meantime to get there?
The biggest hurdle we're facing right now is, although Governor Walker has budgeted this $19 million that is appropriated, but it is not yet passed the Joint House, the Senate, and it needs to be voted on at this time. So this is where we're reaching out for community and public support.
Well, I know that the Joint Finance Committee, which oversees the budget and has been soliciting public comment throughout the state over various aspects of the budget. I know a lot of focus on, for instance, on education, which I happen to be, partial to. But in this case, the dam, and the closest hearing would have been in Ellsworth. How did you get some people that went down there and talked about the Falls project? Yeah,
it was received very well. I was really happy with the turnout of people that showed support for this. We had 3 people speak. I was one of them. I actually have a really brief 1-minute overview of what our request was. That would maybe be something.
This is a good time. Why don't you?
Would that be okay? I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
And this was directed to the senators and to the Joint House.
So what did you tell them?
Basically, I said I speak on behalf of the Lake Mallalieu Association, consisting of over 100 homeowners, the 3 surrounding municipalities that participate in monitoring the river quality, and the Hudson area community. Unlike other dams in the state, this one is unique. It creates Little Falls Lake, the focal point of the Willow River State Park, the 4th most visited park and one of the top revenue producing state parks in Wisconsin. The park generates nearly $30 million annually in community expenditures, which we've talked about, and is visited by over 800,000 guests annually. Additionally, talking about the 2 other dams, in the last 15 years, 2 dams upstream of the park have been removed. This created a situation where Little Falls Dam was the last sediment trap in the Willow River before Lake Mallalieu and the St. Croix River. Since the dam was breached in 2015, the United States Geological Survey indicates that sediment flow into Lake Mallalieu the first year alone increased nearly 15 times over previous years. Breaking that down, annually it used to be about 2,600 tons of sediment. In 2016, that number was over 36,000 tons, a very dramatic increase. But in summary, without this dam in place to protect downstream flooding and recreating a sediment trap, the water depths of the Willow River, Lake Mallalieu, have and will continue to be impacted. This is causing loss of plant and fish habitat, impacting migratory wildlife, and impairing the ability to navigate, causing hardships for residents and hundreds of community members that use the river and the lake regularly. And we're just asking your support. Funding this project was deeply appreciated. This was to the House.
So that was your testimony to the Joint Finance Committee?
That was.
And I know their requirement is basically 2 minutes, so you were well under your 2-minute allotment there, but you said a lot. Now, that's really all you're asking folks to do. I mean, anybody that has an interest, whether it's a direct riparian ownership interest or whether it's just a matter of being part of this, wanting to see this part of the state succeed, which we are Western Wisconsin Journal, and I think the Willow River really is a jewel for this part of the state. So it's all about management of the resources that God's given us. So what can people do specifically?
You know, the thing that people could do right now, Jamie, that literally we have made so easy, reach out to our senators, to our legislators. The easiest way of doing that is go to our website, lakemallalieu.com. On the home page, you will see a form letter basically showing you the email address, who to send it to, the subject line, which is Little Falls Lake, and we ask people to share their own experiences because we don't want this just to be a form letter, although if you don't have the time, copy and paste it, put your name in it, that's fine. But there are so many people that this is
getting their name in front of the legislators and seeing that it's not just one or two people in the area that are pushing this.
We want thousands of people. This is going to impact tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. We just want everybody to realize the critical nature of this and the importance of it right now. It's very critical.
And it's very timely. I'm assuming we're going to get this up. We're taping this on April 27th, trying to get this on because big decisions get made towards the end of May. Sometimes those budget decisions leak into June, but this will be, when those priorities are going to be made, and we need people that are going to be advocates for this part of the state.
Yes, we do. We do.
So anything else that we haven't touched on? We mentioned about the hurdles and the reasons to support the replacement. Many different groups are working together. You got the municipalities of Hudson, North Hudson, Town of Hudson, and then the homeowners associations along the way. Mm-hmm. Is there any other points that you'd like to get across?
I think in summary, Jamie, we really want to thank all of our government officials, the DNR, all of the community partners. There's been a lot of people that have, like myself, put their passion, their heart into this, and we want to thank them. Our goal is to realize that partnerships survive and succeed, and we are here to partner with anybody. If anybody has any questions, if we don't have an answer, we will find an answer. But we feel that what we're asking for and what the community input has indicated to us is that we are reaching out for what the masses want and what the community and the municipalities want. And I want to continue to watch children catch their first fish on Lake Mallalieu. That's all I want. It's very simple.
Very succinct. And well, thank you. And thank you for pointing this out because this has got far-reaching impacts, not just economic, but environmental, historical, and like you say, family. This is like a member of the family, so to speak. So I appreciate you pointing this out. Our guest has been Jim Thomas from the Lake Mallalieu Association. And I want to do another plug for your website. It's www.lakemallalieu.com. And folks could spend an hour just navigating that site, but it gives them a lot of information, and they should go there to get some idea. If they want to use the form letter that's there, fine, but otherwise the message is please contact your legislators the next 30 days. That month of May is going to be really critical to do that. Thank you for joining us on another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal, and Jim, thanks for being my guest.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You bet.
All right.